Did you know that you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide in Excel by using simple formulas? And that Excel will update the results later on if the numbers change. Let me show you how it works. I start by typing an equal sign in a cell to let Excel know I'm entering a formula. If I want to add two numbers, I type the first number, then the math operator, here a plus sign, and then the second number. Notice that at this point, the formula appears both here in the cell and in the formula bar. When I press Enter, I see the calculation results in the cell. When I select the cell again, I see that the formula used in the calculation appears in the formula bar. In the same way, I can subtract one number from another using a minus sign to indicate subtraction. I can multiply two numbers using an asterisk to indicate multiplication, and divide one number by another using a forward slash to indicate division. Excel goes one step further by giving me some pre-written formulas called functions. For example, I use the sum function all the time to find totals, such as the total monthly entertainment expenses that you see here. First, I select the cell where I want the total to be. Then on the Home tab, in the Editing group, I click Sum. Let's pause a moment to examine what we see at this point. First, notice the marquee surrounding the cells included in the formula. In the cell I've selected for the total, the parts of the formula are displayed, starting with sum, which is the name of the function. B4:B7 is the information, the argument, that tells the sum function what to add. Notice that the argument uses what is called a cell reference, B4:B7, instead of actual values. Cell references identify individual cells by column heading, such as column B, and row heading, such as row 4. The colon in this formula indicates that the cell reference is a range, including cells in column B, rows 4 through 7. We'll talk about cell references more in a moment. The parentheses separate the argument from the function. The screen tip shows how the formula is written. Okay, back to the task at hand. When I press Enter, I see the result of the sum function in cell B8. When I select the cell, I see the formula in the formula bar. Although that didn't take much effort, sometimes it's easier to copy a formula rather than create a new one. For example, to get the total expenses for February, all I have to do is copy the formula I created for January. To do this, I position the mouse pointer over the lower right corner of cell B8 until the black cross appears. I drag the fill handle over cell C8. When I release the handle, the February total appears in that cell. If I click the February total, I can see in the formula bar that the cell reference automatically changed to column C instead of column B. Now let's say that I forgot to record a video rental for February. I click cell C5 containing the February video rental total and type an equal sign, the original entry, a plus sign, and the additional amount. Then I press Enter. Did you see that? Excel automatically updated the total for the month from $126.92 to $130.92. That's because the formula used cell references rather than actual values. If I had used actual values instead of cell references in the formula, I would need to update the total manually whenever I changed a cell value. Next, let's say I'm curious about the combined amount I spent on video rentals, as shown in cell C5, and CDs, as shown in cell C7. First, I click any cell where I want to display the total. Then I type an equal sign. Next, I can type the complete word sum, or I can type the first few letters and click Sum from the list of functions that appears as I type. I can click cell C5 to include it in the argument, instead of typing C5. I type a comma down in cell C10, and then click C7. Did you notice that I used a comma instead of a colon to separate the cell references? That's because I'm identifying specific cells to include, rather than a range of cells. Finally, I type a closing parenthesis and then press Enter to see the total. Because I don't need to keep that total, I select and delete it. Finally, let me show you another cool thing about cell references. Remember how the cell references automatically changed when we copied the formula from column B to C? That's because relative cell references, ones that change as they're copied, were used in the formula. But in my household, I pay 25% of everything but cable TV, and I want to know what I owe for February. First, I click a cell and type 0.25. Then I click next to the February video rentals in D5 and type an equal sign, followed by the relative cell reference C5, followed by an asterisk as the multiplication operator. Then I enter $D, $9. Why include the dollar signs? Because they indicate to Excel that this is an absolute rather than a relative cell reference. That is, one that always refers to the value in cell D9, which contains the 25%. I press Enter to see what I owe for video rentals. Then I drag the fill handle to copy the formula to rows 6 and 7 and see what I owe for movies and CDs. When I click any of these cells, you can see in the formula bar that the first cell reference, which is relative, changes, and the second cell reference, which is absolute, does not. I use many Excel functions besides sum to simplify the process of entering calculations. For example, if I want to know the average cost of all entertainment for January and February, I select the cell next to the February total. On the Home tab, in the Editing group, I click the Sum Down arrow this time, instead of the Sum button. From the list of handy functions shown, I click Average. I press Enter, and Excel displays the average cost in the cell. No. I guess it displayed some hash marks instead. No worries. That just means the cell's too narrow to display the results of the calculation. If I drag a column boundary to widen it, I see the results I was expecting. Before we finish, let me point you to a plethora of functions to explore on your own. Just click the Sum Down arrow, and then click More Functions. You can choose a category first to narrow the list. When you select a function from the list, it is described briefly here, and you can click Help on this function to find out what you need to know. You pick the function and let Excel do the work.